you're not actually listening to what the emotions mean. And we do this all, we're listening to what we think the emotions mean.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So emotions always tell the truth. Always. Why?
Acting on emotions as guides to truth. Stillness. Surrendering to what is. Seeking. Using my gifts with purpose. Light. This is the emotional blueprint.
Hello, Kimberly.
It's great to be here with you.
It's great to be here. This is our first podcast. And we just got back from this really inspiring and sacred retreat last week.
Yeah, coming off a high.
Yeah.
But before you start, though, we need to talk about why we're doing this and who you are.
Okay. I'm an open book, so we're going to get to know each other better. But I think what I always come back to on my journey as a therapist is 10 years ago, when you're first a therapist, you're basically thrown in and you're seeing these brand new clients and you honestly have no idea what you're doing. And the thing that I was so disappointed about was that no one seemed to have answers on when people on these clients that I was seeing that were really struggling. Like no one seemed to have actual answers that I thought were helpful. People would be suicidal and really struggling. And the answer was like, just give him this Band-Aid or just tell him this thing. And that should be, I'm like, that's not going to work. It really, really quickly, I learned that if I really cared about these people, if I really wanted to do this job, like I had to listen. I had to be a student with the client and something greater than us had to teach us. And that's what I call God. And through this process, I remember these moments where I'm like drawing these diagrams to help this client not be as anxious or to get out of their depression. And I'd never seen this stuff before and I've never heard this stuff before, but it was coming from a place of inspiration and truth. And I was just as illuminated as the client was when we'd go through this. And so this is hard to do, but I've really enjoyed the challenge of trying to continue to do this for the last 10 years. And the reason we're starting this podcast is because there's just too much. There's too much truth that I know that you have learned in your own life and that I feel like I've learned a lot from God and from other people. And we need to get it out. We got to talk about it.
I love it.
We got to talk about it.
Well, knowing you, I mean, Corey was my therapist 7 years ago.
Which is crazy.
I know, right?
Because you're the teacher now.
Well, I came in and I'm like in full marital breakdown, emotional breakdown. And then I see this young 30-year-old that's not married. I'm like, yeah, right. Pass, And yet out of the whole team of people that I was working with, there was something so special. And there was something so wonderful and so healing. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And that's why we're still talking 7 years later, because you really do connect and open up and really get inspired in your sessions. I've witnessed it one-on-one. And so I'm super excited for you now that you're branching out, now that you're doing the things that are different. I'm your biggest fan. So let's talk about it.
I'm your biggest fan too. So to talk a little bit about Kimberly. So what Kimberly is going to bring to this is this wealth of experience. So what really leads to wisdom? It's not experience. She has that, but experience plus like being still and really reflecting and really feeling pain and really having a sincere desire to learn from it. This is what you have done for your whole life. So
yeah, right. Seriously.
It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
First episode, you wanted to talk about emotions.
Yeah. Let's dive into some of these questions. Yeah.
Let's go. Okay. I'm just going to fire some of these off. Okay. I want you to really like give me a really good therapist. So anyone who's listening is like, all right, I'm getting a really good educated answer here.
Okay, well, just so you know, and the audience knows, I'm not the teacher. And Kimberly has this amazing experience, wisdom as well, because she's been through. Okay, if you just imagine
Oh, geez.
some of the worst things that a human can go through, Kimberly's been through many of those things.
Whew.
And so we are going to be talking about these together. That's the power of this. So it's going to
And
be
you
great.
haven't had it that great too, my friend. So let's.
We've both, but yeah, I've had
We all
maybe a
have.
50, I've had maybe a 50-50. Like I've had 50% of the therapist experience, 50% of hard things in my life. You've had like 100% hard things. So to merge all that together is, and to, to be students with that is the beauty of this. So excited. Let me just say this. So for those like who are listening, like the power of this podcast is the gap that is clearly out there. There's a lack of depth about emotions, healing, relationships. There's just a lack of depth. And sometimes when you find that depth, it's really cool. But then what do you find? There's a lack of application. It's like, okay, cool. I have to detach from my marriage a little bit more to find a healthy, like, how do I actually do that?
Right.
We're going to be focusing on depth and practical applications so that if you don't have a therapist, or this is going to be like, hopefully pretty powerful for you and for us as we learn together. So I'm like stoked. I'm excited.
Okay. I love it. All right. So as a therapist and what you've seen in the last 10 years, what is like the most natural way people deal with their emotions?
The most natural way people deal with their emotions is they don't deal with them.
Right.
So if you just imagine like just this passive person that's walking down the street and sadness might come up or anxiety might come up. If they don't do anything, that's what most people do. They're like, it's really uncomfortable. They don't believe they need to do anything and they don't want to do anything. So what happens is these negative feelings, they physically get stored inside of our body. So they're actually taking up physical space inside of our body. Our body can only hold so much pain. And so these physical emotions are being stored. And obviously these emotions are getting stored physically. And so what happens is that we start to have physical symptoms. Some doctors that are more emotionally in tune, they believe that 90% of all physical symptoms come from unresolved emotions. 90%.
Western doctors.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But ones that are more open to Eastern,
right.
These aren't like your typical, because most doctors just believe like, oh, you have, your stomach's hurting. Like, no, like it's just because of, let's look at your diet, but anxiety plays a huge role in that as an example. So, okay. So these negative emotions are getting stored in our body. They start taking up space. Our body can only hold so much. And we all, based on our genetics, we have these certain thresholds. So if there's enough negative emotion that gets built up, our body just starts to react. So this is one of the main root causes of depression and anxiety. If you want to know what the main root cause or the root cause of depression and anxiety is someone not knowing how to address or deal with the negative emotions that are coming up for them. And I'm not just talking about managing them. You have to actually, we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but you have to actually like listen to them and what they're trying to tell us. That's maybe somewhat of an intro to emotions.
Right.
That you probably already knew.
Yeah, but you can know all this, but to actually apply it, I mean, that's a whole other thing. And integrate it and embody it, I'm still working on that.
Yeah, and we'll
Big
talk
time.
more about that, I'm sure.
Okay, so then how do people need to change how they view emotions? If that's the case, they're not dealing with it. How do they need to change how they view emotions?
So I think what I see happen, even with experts in the psychology field, the way that they view emotions is it's something that needs to be managed. So to give a good example of this, I think a good example is like, what is the difference between stress and anxiety? Stress is something that we all experience to some degree, but stress is something that needs to be managed. I can go work out and that'll help relieve the stress. I can go, just exercise, or I can listen to this and that'll relieve the stress. But for example, with anxiety and a lot of the other emotions, it is literally coming from our body or our spirit that is trying to tell us something that we need. So the main shift change that people need to have with how they view emotions is a messenger with a message. This is my spirit trying to tell me actually what I need. And the challenge for all of us is learning how to listen. Okay, what is the emotion that I'm experiencing right now? And then what does it actually mean that I need? We're going to start, I'm sure we'll start talking more about that. That's the major shift that people need to have with how they view emotion.
So just like pain in your body, that's the way it's speaking to you and telling you, go get that. Emotions are doing the exact same thing. It's a messenger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to imagine it like an engine light going on in your car. So you're driving your car, the engine light pops on. You can just manage it by saying, hey, like, I'm just going to ignore this or drive faster or whatever, or I'm just going to put a piece of tape over it so I don't see it. That's kind of managing it. But like, you're not actually listening to what this is saying, And so to go to your point, there's 11 negative emotions. And for example, sadness is a good example. Every time we feel sadness, it means the same thing. Every time we feel anxiety, it means the same thing.
They have one message.
They have one message. Yes.
What is that?
So there's 11 different emotions. So they all have different messages. But for example, sadness is anytime we feel sadness, we are experiencing a loss or a loss of hope every single time.
How about anxiety? What's the underlining message there? Always the same.
So there's a couple different types of anxiety. So you've got there's two main ones. You got anxiety coming from thoughts. So, and then you have anxiety that's what I call emotional anxiety. So we have cognitive anxiety coming from thoughts, and then we have like emotional anxiety and anxiety coming from emotions. So cognitive anxiety that comes from thoughts. So imagine your spirit inside of your body or your soul, whatever you want to call it, is like a built-in lie detector. Okay. So there's a very real dark influence in the world. If you're religious, you might believe that's Satan. If you're not, then you might just energy or whatever. But it's very real. Mm-hmm. And the way that this darkness manifests itself is through thoughts. That's the main way it manifests itself. Okay, so I'm just going throughout my day and I have these negative thoughts coming to my mind. Let's say I have a thought that comes in my mind right now that says, Corey, when you drive home after this podcast, you're going to get in a car crash and you're going to die. If I hold on to that, I'm going to start feeling anxiety. Okay. So anxiety, this lie detector that's built into our body, this lie detector is literally, the anxiety is literally our this lie detector trying to say, dude, the way that you're viewing this is not accurate. Like false view of situation. So anxiety is really uncomfortable for people, this cognitive anxiety, because it feels like something horrible is going to happen. But what it actually means emotionally or spiritually is my perspective is off and I need to then correct my view and the anxiety goes away. So many people view anxiety as like stress. And if you deal with anxiety the same way you deal with stress, then you end up just ignoring the anxiety because it's like, oh, I just need to go work out. But it's like, dude, if you're feeling really anxious and you just go work out, that's fine. That's not a bad thing to do necessarily. But you're basically ignoring the entire message of the anxiety, which is saying, hey, you're viewing some things about your relationship or about your drive home that are like off, that are not checking out. So you need to address those. So that's just an example with like anxiety that comes from thoughts. So there's anxiety that also comes from like past pain, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that at some point.
Well, I love that. And I love this whole part about this lie detector. I was just talking to a friend who deals with anxiety. Anxiety has run my life for many of years. And you being a spiritual person, this lie detector idea, these thoughts, how do you know when how would you answer this question? How do you know when it's intuition versus anxiety and your brain is like literally playing tricks on you? Because we're supposed to like check in, and this anxiety or these negative emotions are almost completely giving us this false sense of what's my intuition, I would love to know your take on how do you tell people to tell the difference between those two things?
It's a beautiful question. So the question is, what is the difference between intuition and like anxiety, or like, how can I tell, like, because when I'm feeling anxious, I'm actually feeling like something bad is going to happen. But what if God, or whatever the source of intuition you believe in, what if it's trying to warn me of danger?
Right.
What if it's trying to tell me that something bad is actually going to happen?
Right.
Okay. So
welcome to my world. This is really bad.
Yep. So here's what's cool. There's a scripture in the Bible that's really beautiful. It says, God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of love and power and a sound mind. So intuition, or God, never uses anxiety as a warning of something that we need to avoid. Now, don't get me wrong. If a bear barges in here right now, we're going to be feeling anxious. That's totally different. That's live danger. If we just stop and think about that, like, is this no, we need to get the heck out of there. But if anyone has ever had this experience, if you've had this experience where you actually have been warned of danger, you'll notice it doesn't come through anxiety. It comes actually from your spirit. You might feel like a knot in like you just know that something is off. You just kind of know. It's like when intuition or spirit is influencing us, we see it for what it is. There's a clarity to it. We like, I just know that something is wrong and I need to take time and process and think about it. Spiritual warnings or intuition never come through anxiety.
Yeah.
So if you have to sit there and be like, okay, if I'm feeling anxious right now, is this God warning me, or is this intuition trying to warn me of danger? You can automatically know the answer is no.
That would save me a lot of heartache in my life. Okay, so how does not dealing with emotions affect people spiritually? Since we're talking about this intuition, this spirit, when you don't deal with your emotions, do you think it actually affects your spirituality?
I actually think you should answer this question. Yes,
no.
I'm going to ask you this question and we're going to talk about it.
Oh, shoot.
So if I just stop dealing with my emotions, if I just make a decision, how is that going to affect you or me spiritually?
Well, going back to our conversation in the car, when in the past, when I have gotten inspiration, intuition, anxiety, fear, whatever's coming at me and I can't filter it out and I'm trying my best. Yeah, if I numb that, oh yeah, my spirit, it dims, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I overanalyze it, it creates more, if I take it intellectually, it creates more anxiety. So I can't think my way through it. The first thing when you asked that, it was you self-betray. And to me,
Totally.
that self-betrayal of knowing something and whether I'm not strong enough to act on it, whether I'm too afraid to look at it, maybe I'm in overwhelm and just want to put my head in the sand, my spirit is actually offended. It's like I'm truly trying to help you, Kimberly, and I act like I want to see it, but I'm way too scared to actually do what I need to do. And so
100%.
yeah, then spiritually, I have to end up forgiving myself for having this loving higher power trying to help me and me going, la, 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 la. Like, no way, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And then it stops because it's like, how much more can I tell you? And then it sends different people into your lives and different relationships and different things that you read. And it's coming at you. If it can't get you through your emotions, it tries to get you through different avenues. And then it builds so big until you can't ignore it anymore. And then a grenade blows off in your life. You pull that pin and you have blown it all up. So yeah, that's, I think, how ignoring my emotions, because I'm a very emotional person. Anyone that knows me is like, she'll cry like this or she'll do that. I feel like I'm very in touch with my emotions, but I don't think I had probably the self-love to know that I was worth an answer and that the answer really was trying to help me and to trust that.
Another really true and powerful way to view ignoring emotions. Like, okay, negative emotions that are stored in our body or pain that is there from our past. What it is, it's actually internal fog.
Right. You talked about this.
We were talking about this at the retreat a little bit. Okay, so just think about that. So I'm in a relationship and I don't know if this person is healthy for me. But I've been having these emotional signals trying to tell me if the relationship is right for me, if I'm actually listening to the sadness or the hurt. Hurt is, we'll talk about hurt more. But if I'm not listening to those emotions, it actually creates this internal fog. So I'm not able to see things for the way that they really are. This is what happens all the time in relationships. This is why people open up to their girlfriends. They're like, leave him. He's so bad for you. And it's like, why can't they see it? It's not that they're necessarily blinded by love, although that can be a part of it. They're literally blinded by these negative feelings that they're not listening to.
Oh, I'm a professional.
All of us have been there with that one.
Okay, but question, when you have a traumatic thing happen in a relationship, something comes up, and then you start operating, and then it's like you have a good friend going, you actually don't trust your emotions right now. They're not like, I need to call them, or, you start operating from these weird things after you've had this traumatic event. And then you're like, wait a minute, I'm in therapy. I'm trying to feel my emotions and work through them. But now you're telling me I can't trust my emotions? Have you ever told someone that? Like, don't trust that right then. It might not be, this is actually not love. This might be attachment. Or do you see what I'm saying? Like, but I still love it. Like that emotion, like trauma makes all this go a little wonky wonk, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, for sure. Well, if you're having trauma in a relationship and you think you need to stay in the relationship, you're not actually listening to what the emotions mean. And we do this all, we're listening to what we think the emotions mean.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So emotions always tell the truth. Always. Why? Because they are coming from our own spirit. And so we should talk about that for a second. Okay. So what is our spirit? Our spirit is literally made up of light. Okay, what is light? Light is truth. So your spirit, my spirit, everyone's spirit is made up of truth. This is where all emotions come from, negative and positive. We love the positive ones, but we don't want to believe that the negative emotions, we just maybe don't think about it enough. They are the warnings. They are the messengers. And so people that are more religious or spiritual, unfortunately, they discount emotions a lot. This happens, unfortunately, a lot in Christianity, where they are focusing on, it just, not Christianity, but all religions. So emotions and emotional and spiritual is one and the same. If someone is actually really interested in progressing spiritually, God's going to be more involved in your life for a while. He's going to kind of, teach you how to ride the bike, but eventually he's going to expect you to start listening to your own spirit. And in other words, listening to your emotions. And so that's a beautiful path of spiritual growth when we can start to get better at that. And we feel, it just feels great.
Okay. So question for you. Emotions and feelings. What's the difference?
Same thing. Yeah.
Just different words. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. And we're obviously dispelling this whole idea that emotions need to be managed. We're like, that's the weird narrative that we've been taught, but now we're trying to change that, feel it, witness it. What?
Let's just be totally real with that one. Let's just speak your language, because you're always real. So let's just say you were at work today.
Yeah.
And you had anxiety come up.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. We're hitting a real, okay. So anxiety comes up. So it's not realistic to be able to stop your work task and to spend 5-10 minutes like processing this anxiety. Okay. You just can't do it. So you have to manage it a little bit. So I call this like emotional shelving. So you have to put the emotion on the shelf and you have to talk to it. You have to say, hey, anxiety, I know that you're trying to help me live in truth, live in line with truth. I can't talk right now though. Like, so let's chat later. And you have to keep that appointment later. Because if you don't, like you said, then you're abandoning. You can't lie to yourself. This is you. The anxiety is coming from your deeper you. So if you blow it off, like you can't, you can't.
She gets so mad.
Right.
So mad when I ignore her.
So I really like the visual of these emotions. I don't know why I view them as like M&Ms in my own mind, like the M&Ms on the commercials that have like these cool little, the big tennis shoes, but they're your friends. There's 11 of them. They knock on your door and they're holding an envelope and you might be at work and the anxiety knocks on your door. It's okay. You need to at least open the door and talk to it for a second. Otherwise we're avoiding it. And then they get more upset. So, hey, anxiety, I see you. All of us like to be seen. I see you. But as you can see, like things are crazy right now. So let's chat later at 7:00. And then at 7:00 or whatever time, you got to do it within 24 hours. Otherwise it's avoidance. And your body knows that. You got to do it within 24 hours. And then when you revisit it, then we'll talk more about like how to specifically like process that so that you're like this. We're going to talk about some practical applications so that you know what to do. But yeah.
Yeah, I need like a straight up ABCD. Exactly what to do.
Should we talk about that right now?
I would love it.
Let's talk about it right now.
Coming home after being stressed at work and then now sitting down and going, okay, now let's bring that all back up again.
Okay, so for the audience who can't see, we actually have a TV in this room. And this TV, we're going to be putting diagrams on some of the stuff that we talk about so that you can actually see it live. This is our first one, though, so you have to be a little patient with us. We're going to get this going soon. But we're going to post this in the notes so that you can have access to some of these diagrams that me and Kimberly talk about. So, okay, step 1. So you felt anxiety today at work. You talked to it, said, hey, thank you. Can't talk right now, though, so we got to talk later. So at 7:00, you bring it back up. Almost nobody does this.
Yeah, I was like,
because it's uncomfortable. I don't want to go back to it.
No.
But like, this is the path of growth, spiritual growth, emotional growth. It's like essential. Okay. So the 3 steps are, the first step is what is the emotion? We've already talked about how it's anxiety, but you might not know it just might be something uncomfortable and you're not sure what it is. And so we'll just say that this is anxiety. So, okay, step 1, check. Step 1, check. I identified what the emotion is. Step 2 is to feel the emotion if necessary. Okay, so why do we say if necessary? Well, from what we know from the work that I've done with people and my own personal experience and what I've done with people over the last 10 years, the only emotions that we need to actually sit there and feel when we revisit them are hurt, sadness, and guilt. We'll talk more about why maybe, but those are the important ones to feel. So this is anxiety.
hurt, sadness, guilt.
Hurt, sadness, and guilt.
All the others, you don't have to sit and refill it.
Nope. You need to acknowledge that they're there and you need to get the message, but those aren't feeling emotions.
Okay.
You have to go through your own personal, like if let's say the emotion was frustration. There's a spiritual intuition we've been talking about. There's like an intuition that if you just, let's say the emotion you felt today was frustrating and you just sat there and felt that, right. You'd be like, what? Like it might actually make it can actually make things worse. You might actually end up feeling more frustrated. And the conclusion you'd come to would be the same about frustration, which frustration means that there's some kind of a personal imbalance going on. Often too much going out and not enough coming back in. We'll talk more about that another time.
Yeah, well, they all say you have to feel it to heal it. So you're sitting there, if you don't feel it, and that's like truly bringing up tangible energy in your body.
Please don't do that.
Don't.
Do it when it's hurt, sadness, or guilt. That's really important. The other ones, you don't have to feel them. This
is new for me.
You need to revisit it. Okay, I'm feeling anxious. One of the reasons why you don't need to feel these other emotions is, especially if you have a lot of anxiety or a lot of anger, the reason you don't need to sit there and feel those is because often the root of those is sadness, hurt, or guilt.
Okay, so we're just going right to the
We
root.
wanna go
We're going to the under.
Mm-hmm.
So we feel it, we bring in the sadness. All of a sudden we're in step 1. Tears might start coming down and we're feeling sad and we're sitting there going, okay, how long do I have to sit here and feel this sad?
Oh my gosh.
And then what do I do next?
So your question is, how long do I have to feel the sadness? Or if it's like pain, hurt, sadness, or we should talk about this for a second. Hurt, sadness, and guilt are what we refer to as pain. Those are the pain emotions. All of the other emotions can be considered suffering. Okay, so this is a very important distinction. So what is the difference between pain and suffering? In Eastern teachings, they talk a lot about how as human beings, we're actually meant to experience pain. Pain is a part of the journey of our life. It's important for our growth. But as human beings, we're not actually meant to suffer. We're not actually meant to emotionally suffer. We should clarify that. So what is the difference between pain and suffering then? Suffering is, simply put, it's the same pain that's occurring over and over and over again. But pain, if we're in the right space to feel it, if we're ready to feel it, if we're in the right space to feel it, then when we feel it and process it, it's a miracle. It's a miracle of, if those who are Christian, it's the miracle of Christ. For those who aren't Christian, it's a miracle of the letting go process. We feel pain when we're ready to feel it, and it goes away. It's amazing. But suffering, to go back to your example, let's say you're at work and you felt a anxiety bomb, like at a level 10. Most likely that's not coming from just thinking. You're experiencing what we call a trigger, which is something that's happening throughout your day is bringing up some hurt or sadness from your past that isn't resolved yet. Maybe it's from a relationship.
Right. It was, I wasn't good enough. Oh, messed up again. So it went back to like self-worth. And so the anxiety was the stress. The physical thing was like sweating and clamming. And then it went back to that probably shame.
It's shame is what you're describing now.
And then shame came in. And then when shame comes in, I'm flattened. And I have to like climb myself back out of that and go, no, this wasn't my fault. This is completely out of my control. And then I can kind of logical it. But that's where I'm actually stuck with this. Like you feel it, but then what? After it feels, it just goes away. Is there another step? Or is it just gone? Yeah,
there's definitely another step. Remember, these emotions are knocking on your door with an envelope. So if it's pain, if it's sadness, hurt, or guilt, we have to let them inside our house and then feel them. And after we feel them, then we need to take the envelope. They'll hand us the envelope, and we open the envelope, and there's a deeper lesson. We can only learn this deeper lesson after we feel the pain. It just
happened for me just now. Like right here talking to you, it just clicked. It was like, I felt like crap. I felt like I let people down. And now here it is, literally 7:00. If we're doing this in real time, this happened. Now I'm here, I'm feeling it. And then there's this thought, there's just like this little impression that's, well, of course you felt that way because you care. And how beautiful that you're such a caring person that you love. And then all of a sudden it just went, boop. Oh, wait. That just showed how much I cared. That just showed how much my friends meant to me. And I wanted to make sure their experience was great. And it wasn't. So then I thought, no. Oh, wait, this just reminded me who I am.
That's really cool.
That was the coolest little thing.
Coolest little thing.
No, I'm not.
So there's nothing.
Great day at work.
Yeah.
I'm just.
So there's nothing. Yeah. There's nothing actually deeper there.
Wow.
You.
Okay.
So that's cool.
That was interesting. I've never processed like that. It just went. Mm-hmm. That was cool.
It is cool. So without getting lost in the sauce of some of what we're talking about, though, like difference between pain and suffering is the same pain that happens over and over again. So if you did have something deeper, if you like anxiety can come up often when there's a trigger as a mask, meaning that there's some pain, maybe from a relationship or something is still there. So that would be something important to feel. There's some sadness down there that you still need to feel. That's the real emotion. So you feel that real emotion and you process that sadness, then the anxiety goes away. The suffering is over as far as that particular thing. But what's happening is people are continuing to live in a state of suffering over and over and over again. And what are they doing? They're treating it like stress. They're just managing it like, oh, like the anxiety bomb dropped again today. That means I got to go work out after work. It's like, homie, please take time to listen to what your spirit is trying to tell you. Working out's fine, but your biceps are huge at this point. Like, can we please, so the natural process of like, what am I feeling it if necessary. And then the very last step is what we've been talking about, which is, what is this emotion trying to tell me that I need right now? And the cool thing is your emotion, it was almost like compassion.
Yeah, I needed compassion for myself, that I did everything I could have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I get really hard on myself. And if there's no self-compassion, I'll stay in that suffering for long
Beautiful.
time.
Yeah, so shame and compassion, we'll talk about that in depth another time because that's a big one.
Back to, because we were talking about therapists and this thing about managing emotions. What do you think are some other gaps in therapy that you've noticed when people come to you like, well, my last therapist told me to do this or whatever? You're noticing these gaps and trying to maybe kind of clean up and pick up the pieces of really how to help people through these difficult emotions.
The two biggest gaps regarding emotion is this view that it's kind of what we've been talking about, but this view of like, I can manage them away, and the lack of understanding that they are messengers with a message. Like they're trying to tell me something specific. Those are the two biggest gaps.
So it's back to emotions mean the same thing every time. It is literally your spirit sending you a message. Please listen.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And for anyone that's like spiritually interested in growing in that, it's like, if you believe in God, if that's part of your spiritual belief, most Christians, the Christian canon and how they view God is that he is very powerful and that he's very loving and that he's all knowing. And this is kind of a deeper principle that I don't think people get. What I'm about to say is like, God doesn't need to check in with someone else if he is doing something right. Like he just knows. How has he gotten there? Part of his process is he had to learn to listen to himself, his own emotions, his own journey. And it's very powerful. We start getting better and better at that. Think of the confidence that comes when someone's like, I don't have to be afraid of relationships anymore. Because if I get hurt, I know exactly what to do with that. I know exactly, I can feel it. And I know exactly what it means. When emotions come up, I know exactly what to do. That is real confidence, spiritually and emotionally. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, and we talked about this in the car on the way up. I was sharing with you how for the first 40 years of my life, I was taught to look outside myself for answers, for direction, for anything. I was never turning around and looking within. And here these emotions, these promptings, these inspirations were literally coming out of my body, physically manifesting in massive illnesses. And I'm still seeking somewhere else because I'm way too scared to really check in and really go deep. And
that's so hard.
But
yeah,
you're now saying, trust this. And I think I'm finally getting to turn within, as well as obviously checking in with my higher power, but really finding and knowing that the truth, that lie detector we talked about, it's the superpower. If we
it is.
are clear, clean, like aligned, we really do walk around with this superpower, this lie detector that really will help us. I think, hopefully my goal is in the future to not have to go through so much pain and suffering if I actually do listen to that.
It's really
It's a muscle.
It's really powerful what you're saying.
I got to build.
Because our spirit is wanting to cleanse us. It is wanting to have this pain go out of our body. So why isn't it happening? Well, we get in our own way of doing that all the time. You know, in Buddhism, they talk about this all the time of like swimming against the current. The current of life is pain comes up. I'm aware of it and I take time to feel it and surrender to it. They're big on surrendering to it. And so am I. It's so important. But you know, your experience is interesting because it was all hitting you at the same time. And that's just like, that's when we need a guide. That's when we
100%.
need that.
It's not, yeah.
We cannot do that alone.
No, we cannot.
That's what I was going through when I talked earlier about when I was younger. I didn't have a guide and I suffered for a really long time. And, you know, so I know that you did as well. And so in Buddhism, they talk about how that suffering that me and you went through is all a necessary part of the enlightenment that we obviously have now. No, I'm just kidding.
It's so enlightened.
It's a work in progress for all of us. But I maybe want to say one thing that you touched on that I think is so cool. This is a statement that has gotten like social mediaized or whatever. I think I've seen it a lot, but it's a really powerful statement. And maybe this could sum up some of our emotional conversation, which is we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, when even a little bit of anxiety is there or negative feelings are there, we aren't seeing things as they are. We're seeing life and people through this lens of our own pain and our own negative feelings that might be there. This is why people are judgmental. This is why people mistreat other people. They're not actually seeing the other person for who they are. They're seeing them as they are. So they are seeing someone through this filter of their own pain and suffering. And it's a projection. I'm actually seeing you as, to some degree, what's already there within myself.
As a professional at that as well.
I mean,
like professional.
Yeah, all of us
projection
do that, so.
Queen. And it's pretty freeing when you can recognize you're doing that and the shift that happens. And then literally the colors come back in the world. Everything was gray for me for so long. So gray. It did not matter. Those glasses were so gray. And so just now, you know, being a little bit on the other side of that, seeing the light come back in, seeing the colors come back in, feeling again, feeling positive emotions instead of all negative emotions. It's life-changing. So
it is.
I appreciate you. It's a good reminder. It's real stuff.
I appreciate you sharing that. So can I ask you a question now?
Yes.
What is the hope for people? Because I think a lot of people are in this gray area where, you know, they wake up and they go to work and it's the same thing. And they may not even realize it, but they're carrying quite a bit of pain or anxiety, whatever. What is the hope for people that are in that gray space?
Well, coming from living with years and years of no hope and almost like resenting people that were hopeful. Right. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I just think there is hope. This is what I tell my kids. And to me, there's just the belief that there's got to be something bigger than us, that we aren't meant to come here and feel pain and suffer alone, that there are people in your lives that do care about you and they want the best for you. And really, in those moments of real darkness, if there's any way humanly possible, you have a way to find even a speck of light and then try your best to nourish that light and to grow it bigger and to consciously every day wake up and make the choice to grow that light. That there is a miracle, there is a power in that becoming bigger and bigger. And then you kind of start feeling the hope and just trusting the process that we are not meant to come here just to feel sad and to suffer. But you got to want it,
Mm-hmm.
and you got to work for it, and you got to keep showing up.
It's really powerful what you're saying.
Yeah, that's just kind of because it's
Let's-
so hard.
Let's dive into that more since we're all about preaching this depth.
Let's preach.
It's really powerful what you're saying. It goes back to what we've been talking a little bit about light. Okay, so you talked about finding a speck of light. Okay, how does somebody do that specifically? So remember, light is truth. You are made up of it. And so if you are feeling absolutely like there's no hope, one of the best things that you can do is put yourself in a position where you are intaking truth. That might start with a dumb YouTube video that you come across, or that might start like going to church, or that might be going to a therapist. Like, it's when we feel really sad and hopeless and we don't know how to get out of it, we are not meant to do it alone, period. And so that, I think that's the important thing. And then that's where the light can begin to grow. And that might mean God, that might mean a tree. It's like me and this tree, and I'm putting my ear up to this tree, and I'm really trying to listen to what this tree might be trying to tell me. Whatever it is, there's an endless amount of avenues that we can, but the point is like, we have to put ourselves in the role of a student. And we have to recognize, it's kind of like AA, in the 12-step program. One of the first steps is recognizing that you can't do that you're powerless and you can't do this by yourself.
Right.
That is the key. And then from there, it's, I'll just say this. I've seen this a lot as a therapist. I've had people say to me on their first session, like, dude, you're a little young. It seems like you might not know what you're doing. I'm just going to tell you that if this doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself.
Oh.
Right? I'm like, bring it. No, I'm like a little freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, there has to be an answer, because that just like, there has to be an answer. And there always is. There always is an answer. There always is hope.
And sometimes it's like when you're in that dark place and you have no hope, the last thing that's on your mind is spiritual things, because
Of
you're
course.
angry, you're mad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes for me, when we talk about that speck of light, I've been in my bedroom, the lights are off. I haven't been able to get out of bed. I have been horizontal. I don't know how I'm going to get vertical again. And true story, I have laid there and been like, my life is void of any light. It's just dark and it's all consuming. And there'll be a moment where it's like, then go outside. Because if I can't tap into spiritual, I will just roll out of my bed, stumble outside, lay on the grass, just to get in front of physical light. We talk this spiritual thing, but man, when you're in that low space, and then I plop myself out in the grass, I'm grounding in nature, and the sun is shining on me. And that's when the miracles come in. Like, sometimes it literally is so simple as just, I had to baby step it. I had to take it real basic, because it was just too painful. So yeah, there's so many different ways you can get light. Music, turn on beautiful music, nature, spirituality, whatever it takes. But it's growing that, it's somehow stepping back into your own light, or borrowing someone else's for a hot minute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it'll be cool, because we're going to devote one podcast just to talking about like sadness, which, like we talked about earlier, often means sadness always means either loss. I'm experiencing a loss of something, or a loss of hope specifically. So we're going to spend one podcast just talking about that, because that is talking about gaps. That's another big gap. I'm feeling so sad. How do I actually turn this around?
Mm-hmm.
The answer is hope. And okay, what does that even mean? Hope is feeling the truth of something that I can't currently see. It's like kind of like it is a spiritual thing. I was just talking to somebody today. One of my clients was talking to me about how he just broke up with this girl, and he feels hopeless. He feels sad that he's never going to get married. He's never going to meet a woman that's going to love him and see him for who he is. So he's experiencing sadness. Okay, that means a loss of hope. he can feel the sadness. Remember, that's step 2 in this 3-step process of dealing with any emotion. But then in order for that sadness to completely go away, he has to find hope. Specifically, what does that look like? We're going to talk more about that, but to give a little sneak peek, finding hope is feeling the truth about our future. He has to, it's either whether it's God or something greater than himself is usually what we recommend, which is God, mountain, whatever, or a mountain or whatever it is. I have to ask this question and I have to actually feel something as a result of it. It's because we don't know what our future is, but there's a force out there that does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's not talked about enough in therapy. It's like people are afraid to go there. For me, it's God. That's like my clear connection, but it can be many things. Without talking too much, I remember this girl who was being abused by her father. And he would get really drunk and he would hit her and her mom, and she was wanting to kill herself. And so what does she do? She leaves the house and she doesn't want to kill herself, but she's like, I want to die. And she goes and sits by the ocean and she's just sitting there watching the ocean waves come in and go out. And she has this moment where she's like, you know what? I am the ocean wave. Just like things come in, they go back out. And like, she just had this peace, this feeling that things were going to be okay. And that was a gift of hope that she got. And to some degree, she was seeking it. You know, she stood up and she went and sat by the ocean and she was reflective. I could talk about this for too long, but we'll probably do one whole podcast just on that because it's like the coolest topic. But let's do one last question at the end and then we'll wrap up.
Okay. How about let's talk about this. I've heard you in the past talk about that there's no limit to healing. What in your practice have you seen are some of the limitations that people put on their healing?
That's a great question. The biggest limitations that I see put on their healing is just this belief, like I'm doing better. And they have this thought or belief come into their mind that says like, I'll just have to manage or deal with this other stuff like my whole life. And I've gotten used to doing that and it's fine. And it's like the most common thing that I see is when people start coming into therapy and they get to a place where they're feeling so much better than when they first came in. You know, they might have been suicidal or addicted to drugs or whatever when they first came in, but now they're not. They're not suicidal anymore. They have some meaningful relationships. Like they're doing really good. This is when therapy stops for most therapists. They're like, hey, you're doing good. Like, just keep me posted. Let me know if you need anything.
Mm-hmm.
But that is really the beginning, because when someone starts feeling good, that is when they can dive deeper, bring up the root pain and really fully transform. And that is one of the main messages of our podcast and what we were preaching is like, and this goes to something we'll talk more about, which is the natural order of healing. The other big mistake that a lot of people make in therapy and that therapists make is like, let's say somebody comes in and they're suicidal and they know that they have some deep issues there with their dad, as an example. The therapist would be like, hey, we know that that's the root. Let's just dive straight into that.
Oh,
and it's like, oh my god,
you're going to cry. No way.
This is so messy.
Oh.
Now, and let's do EMDR with this or whatever. And it's like, okay, that's not completely a waste. Like you might do some intellectual processing with it, but I promise you that pain is not going away. Pain will not go away unless we honor the natural order. So what is the natural order? Well, the first step is we have to deal with whatever's going on currently, that has to be more calm, kind of like waves in a river or an ocean, I guess we should say. Once those waves have calmed down and your current life is like a little bit better, then that's when you can sail and dive deeper and do that deeper and sail to this like beautiful place of like healing and fulfillment. So basically the natural order of healing is like current problems. If you deal with those, then you can access that deeper pain, that deeper work. then that's what leads to this like deeper purpose and fulfillment. So that is the biggest. People are impatient. Therapists are impatient. I've seen what's the miracle of this is sometimes it takes somebody a year to just deal with current problems. I have to break up with my girlfriend because she's not good for me. And then I have to like figure out my job. And it takes some time to do that. But once you are ready, like actually ready to heal from pain, it takes like 2 minutes because your body is wanting to let go of it. And so all you have to do is be willing. It's a little scary to do this, but you get over the fear of it a little bit. We saw this on the retreat. People got over their fear a little bit, and then they could access some of that pain. And oh my gosh, I can't believe this pain is going away. It's been there for 50 years and it went away in 2 minutes. How is this possible? Well, it's because you're following the natural order of healing. You're not just like trying to take shortcuts.
Right. That's really interesting. I never really thought of it that way. And now I can look back at some of my therapy sessions and realize when I walk in and I'm all hyped up on emotion and the therapist is like, let's just sit and do a guided meditation for a minute. You know, it's like they know I can't even access this because my whole body is hijacked.
I remember that with you.
Right. Like every time. I'm like, I'm not doing anything to this guy. He's just walking me through visualizations. I wasn't even capable and I didn't even realize that. It's just like, wow. So now what you're trying to tell me is now that I'm kind of on the other side of all that pain and I'm doing good, now is when the work happens?
Now is when
I got to keep going to therapy?
Girl, you're already doing that. Like you're feeling, you're on this cool healing path right now because your current life is pretty good.
It's stable.
It's stable.
There's not
stability.
Right? It's stable. We're rebuilding and it's beautiful. And honestly, I have a lot to thank you for, especially this last week. That was like 6 months of going every Wednesday at 5 for therapy in 1 week, you know? It was really cool.
Well, I love you, my friend.
I love you too, Corey.
Good sesh number 1.
We did it.
We did it.
If you have benefited from this podcast in any way, it would mean the world to us to have you subscribe, to allow us to keep it going and bring on inspirational human beings.